And
Get about.
we're rolling.
Okay, just maybe for purposes, so if we use your names and we have correct sponsors, just say your names and spell them for us. Just
Sure. Alice St. Clair, ALICE, ST period CLAIR.
Dan VanMeurs, DAN, capital MEURS.
Okay, great. So can you, both of you talk a little about this whole timeline project? I mean, how did this come about? I mean, whose idea was it, and how did it sort of come to fruition?
Well, it was a project of the LGBT Coalition that was active in Grand Rapids in the mid-2000s. And we often did the potluck that was associated with Pride every year. That was kind of our big event. And it was a real comfortable place for the community to come and share a meal. We usually had a speaker. And we thought, well, wouldn't it be cool to establish this timeline to sort of reflect on our history?
Mm-hmm.
And actually, Dan had a wonderful article at the time from the Advocate magazine that got us thinking of all the significant dates in LGBT history.
Yeah, we had done the Pride potluck for a year or two, and Alice said, what if we got a way for people to write down their thoughts about their life experience as it relates to Pride? And I recall that there was an article in the Advocate that did a timeline about national and actually international gay lesbian history. And so that springboarded us to this idea of the Pride timeline called Memories and Milestones, which was Alice's idea, to do that at the Pride potluck, which we did for 3 potlucks through the mid-2000s. Mm-hmm.
And it was significant dates, and there were a lot of national events through the years, but then we realized really a lot was going on locally too, and it was really exploding in that time period with a lot of the legislation around gay marriage and a lot of things changing rapidly. I mean, we were adding things to that timeline, fast and furious, that were happening from that late 90s into the early 2000s. So, you know, we had these significant historical dates, but we thought to really humanize it, we wanted to hear people's significant things in their lives related to this issue. So that's where we thought, well, let's start letting people just put a little Post-it note. And we encouraged them to put it on the timeline and sort of the time period when it happened. It may be a memory, maybe I came out this year, or I met my partner. It really ran the gamut.
Yeah, it's about 100 Post-it notes, and most of them are very personal. Mm-hmm. Although some of them did talk about what was going on in the community, like with the city ordinance, when that was voted in, or different kind of social venues like bars and places that came and left. Mm-hmm. Over the years, a reference to the Women's Music Festival, which, you know, is a national event in northern Michigan. So it was just good reference to a lot of very significant events for people.
Can either of you recall when you sort of invited people to participate in this sort of activity, the kinds of reactions you saw from people as they were kind of, you know, maybe thinking about it in their own heads of what to write, or just have any recollections of how people responded to this project?
Yeah. Well, I remember just standing there because this was very grassroots. I mean, it was a timeline on a piece of butcher paper with Post-it notes, but people stood there and looked at it, and it was a good educational tool for a lot of, especially the younger people that didn't really know the history and the historical dates. But then people, you know, they'd add their note, and then they'd see what other people had added, and they were really comfortable doing it. I was surprised. We didn't know what to expect. We said, you know, put it up anonymously, just add a little message. We really tried to make it, you know, a safe way to express yourself. But people were willing and free to do it, and it was just kind of neat to sit there and watch it unfold.
Mm-hmm. What I remember is people would come into the room, and they would see it. We would tell them what we were doing. They would pause. They would move on. And then maybe 20 minutes later, they would come back and then write something and post it. So people were very thoughtful, very deliberate about what they wanted to add to the timeline.
And we had a loyal following somewhat for our Pride potluck, so sometimes it was neat year after year, because we did this for multiple years, to see the same people reposting, you know, still with my partner, you know, still feeling good, things like that. It was kind of neat to see them reflect once again or add something new.
Great, great. And so you had mentioned this LGBT coalition that existed. Can you say something about sort of how that started and You know, what other kinds of things that they may have done over the years?
I think that at that time frame, we realized that there were a lot of organizations doing different things around this issue. There were a lot of HIV-related organizations. The network existed. Different front runners. Dan was involved with a running group, PFLAG. We all had similar, commitment to this cause, and we thought, well, let's come together and work on some projects together. It was a loose-knit coalition. We weren't any kind of official 501c3. We were just justice-seeking people that cared about a cause. And the Pride Potluck was one of our main things, but we also did some other projects.
The project that still goes on is in October, which is National Coming Out Month. On October 11, National Coming Out Day, we run an ad in the Grand Rapids Press, as large of an ad as we can purchase based on donations, and it has been going about 8 years, maybe 7, 8 years at this point. So the Coming Out Day ad, the Pride Potluck, trying to think of any other things the coalition did, but the intent is to bring together representatives of these different organizations to look for gaps, but also look for places that we are overlapping each other, like scheduling events on the same weekend, on the same date, and how can we coordinate that to better serve the community.
And just communicate amongst each other, help promote each other's events, help support just by working together.
And how often does the group meet?
I haven't been as active in the group in recent years, so I don't know if there's still a structured coalition meeting. We still do the ad every year.
When the group was meeting, it was monthly, year-round. But about a year and a half ago, the attendance was really falling off. We weren't getting representation from many organizations. Some of the organizations had ended, like PFLAG. And so we decided to just focus on the October Coming Out Day ad. The potlucks had ended about 3 years ago, so that would be about 2007, 2008.
As with many organizations, they ebb and flow. But I think we still keep in touch. Those of us that were on that group will continue when there's an issue that pops up. We still have this network of people we'll contact about it, tell somebody about a piece of legislation they might be interested in or something like that.
Sure. Well, I mean, I was pretty excited when Dan said he had this timeline. We're like, really? Wow, that's sort of perfect and sort of what we're trying to do here. So I guess in a sense we see this as an extension of the work that you have already done. Try to do more of that to sort of document this history by collecting stories. And so I'm just wondering if either of you would like to just speak to why you think it's important maybe for future generations to be familiar with this kind of history.
Oh gosh, I think whenever there's a civil rights struggle of any kind, you need to know the roots. You need to know what came before you and the significant dates. And when you saw it on that timeline and how things progressed, and then all of a sudden, all this activity, it was kind of exciting to see that. And history to me is just so important as you move forward, to know where you've been and whose footsteps you're walking in.
And it would be easy for the youth to read something in a chapter of a history book, but to see individual accounts from people who have lived through that civil rights evolution in the West Michigan, in the Grand Rapids area, which in many ways is still, or has been, quite conservative. And it was a very closeted community, and probably even until the early 90s, it was very difficult to be out in public, out at work, out with family. It's a whole different world now, and it will continue to accelerate into the future.
Okay. Great. Great. Why don't you pause it there a second?
Okay.